Hi, my name is May, and I'm diagnosed with BPD, and I'm also a nurse. I've had someone ask me if splitting is a form of emotional flashback. First of all, I want to define what splitting actually is. The definition of splitting I'm getting from the National Library of Medicine. Although it has been given several meanings, it often refers to a defense mechanism whose function it is to split off whole personalities' awareness of distributing realities, good and bad representations of the object or the mind itself. Contrary to repression, which functions to keep representations out of consciousness in a constant manner, splitting is particular in that it allows each side of conflicting representations alternating access to consciousness. The concept of splitting has made it possible to account for contradictions observed in borderline personality disorder, such as feelings and perceptions towards self and others as being all good or all bad, as well as various associated manifestations, sudden mood swings, difficulties maintaining stable interpersonal relationships, fragile self esteem, diffuse identity, and problems with anger and impulsive behavior, to name a few. In Kernberg's theory, splitting refers to segregation of structural elements of personality into positive and negative affective states and object relations, a representation of the self and representation of another person, linked by a positive or negative affect, as well as to the defense process responsible for the segregation. Now, let's get into what an emotional flashback is. According to Pete Walker, emotional flashbacks are a complex mixture of intense and confusing reliving of past trauma from childhood. It is living a nightmare while you're awake, with overwhelming sorrow, toxic shame, inadequacy. Filled with confusing and distressing emotions from the past, an emotional flashback is extremely painful. And I'm getting this definition from the CPTSD Foundation.org. So, with these definitions, when we're talking about splitting, essentially what is happening in a brain of a person with BPD is kind of a flashback of what they may have experienced in the past, especially in the childhood, with their primary caregivers. And this is a learned response. Splitting doesn't come out of nowhere. Splitting is a reaction to some sort of trigger that the person you're splitting from has no idea what's happening. It may be a very minor thing, and the person with BPD may experience this very minor thing as rejection or fear of abandonment. And so, to protect itself, the person goes through the process that is called splitting. When we're talking about the classical sense of flashback, it is not a classical sense of flashback. Although it may maybe seem like it, because the mechanisms are very similar, because through the perceived sense of abandonment or attack, a person with BPD may get the feelings that they have had during childhood, during their formative years. Splitting is a defense mechanism. Splitting doesn't come out of nowhere. Splitting is learned. So, in that sense, if we're talking about the definition of an emotional flashback, it does seem like it may be in the category of emotional flashback because you are reacting out of emotion against a perceived threat and you cannot control it. Also, what is important to say is that BPD is not categorized as a trauma reaction disorder. So, flashbacks are not in the definition of when you're evaluating a person if they have BPD or not. It is also very important to note is that I'm not diagnosed with CPTSD, and I do not know how it is to live with CPTSD, not to my knowledge. And thus, my knowledge on emotional flashbacks is only as goes only as far as what my research can give me. But in conclusion, in my opinion, splitting is a form of an emotional flashback because the splitting that occurs is a reaction to a perceived threat, and an emotional flashback is flashbacks like body flashbacks, sensory flashbacks, like you're living back where you got traumatized. You develop some maybe unhealthy coping mechanisms, and your body reacts to it. That is, in my experience, kind of similar to what splitting is.